Thanks, Nalini. It's always dangerous to write a CV and then forget where you put it, isn't it? Look, I'm talking about the AI Armageddon or the AI Mageddon or however you want to put it. I suppose the sort of first question to ask is, are we talking about some sort of fundamental change to life? Is it like the invention of the printing press where suddenly things can be multiplied around the world at speed, or is it something like the rise of capitalism where the artisan who spent sort of a career learning to make something with skill suddenly is replaced by hordes of people in factories who can produce shoddy goods but for a better profit? Is that what AI will do to knowledge? Or, should we just keep calm and get on with it? I think that's where we're at the moment. We really don't know which of these sort of outcomes, is it good, is it bad, is it something that will just go away? So we're right in the middle of this at the moment, and it's messy. So the first question really, I think, is to say, well, what is it that our students want to know? Because we've got lots of ideas, but what do they really want to know? And they want to know if they're allowed to use it. And they don't want to cheat, they actually want to do the right thing, but they really, really are panicking about, am I allowed to use this, or will I get into trouble? So what they're really looking for is certainty, but at times they're asking for more certainty than we can give them, and really what we're all trying to do is cope with uncertainty in times of change. The other thing they really want to know is, and these are AI-generated images, you can tell, we pick the ones that are AI and the ones that aren't. How is AI going to be used in my career? And by the time I graduate, will everything have moved on so far that I'm already out of date? And are you going to teach me? So we've got students in first year saying to academics, guys, tell me all about AI. And of course, they're faster at learning this stuff than we are. So there's a fundamental sort of speed of change issue that we're all grappling with. So my talk is supposed to be a sort of a recap of how we've been coping this year so far. So what we've done is we've taken, like most universities, a principles approach, and we've basically said we don't want to be scared of AI, we want to incorporate it into everything that we do, but we have to be a little bit cautious. So in terms of what we've been saying to our students, we've been saying, if you use AI, make sure you attribute it. If you attribute it, then you're not hiding your use, and if it's a mistake, we'll be able to cope with it. And we've been saying to them, it's all about trying to work out what is it that you are actually asked to do in the assessment. Read the assessment instructions, and we've been saying to staff, be really clear about what you're asking your students to do. Because once we get that communication between staff and students about the assessment and about the use of AI, a lot of these issues just really disappear. So it's really a communication gap in lots of ways that we're dealing with. So to help with that, we've done what everybody I think has done. We've produced websites that have explained how to use AI in assessment. We've had question and answer sessions. We've run workshops with students. And this is really good for those students who can find it. But for lots of students, they don't pay attention to things that adults tell them because adults don't know. So in those circumstances, it really then comes back to the convener of a course to make sure that what's in the course outlines is actually linking back to these things. So just in time is very important for students. So similarly for staff who came back from what they thought was a relaxing Christmas break to discover that the world had changed on them, we also said, yes, there are these principles on AI that will help. And the staff said, well, that's great, but how do I actually do it in my assessment? So we produced a series of typologies for staff. Here are some words that you can put into your course outlines to explain the levels of AI that are appropriate in your assessment. And we particularly made sure that we were not creating a university level definition of what was acceptable, because the key thing is, what's the learning outcome for the assessment? What's this course all about? Because it's only when you know that you know what the level of AI use for that course, what's appropriate for that assessment. So we really focused on making it convener level controlled use of AI, which again created all sorts of stress, I think, for staff, because staff themselves are dealing with the uncertainty of, I don't know if this will work, what will it do to my assessment? So we've been through a real process of that in term one. And then Turnitin released an AI checker tool, and some universities said, this is too unknown, we're not going to go near it. We decided we could trust our staff to actually use it appropriately and to learn what it would be good for and what it would be not so good for. So we released it, we produced some advice on what it was. We gave a lot of advice about what it didn't do and mistakes and false positives it could create. And we also put a lot of work into sort of explaining to staff that it didn't prove anything on its own. It was just the start of a conversation. And then back that up with lots of resources, and I think everybody's done this. We've got SharePoint sites, we've got websites, we've got team channels, we've got communities of practice, and this is just some of them, and all the faculties are reproducing that as well. So it seems, I think, at one level a little bit chaotic, but at another level, this is the sort of the research phase that we're all going through. So we're all experiencing it differently in different disciplines, and the process will, through these channels, I think, as we come towards the end of the year, we'll start to have a really rich understanding of how AI can be used in education. Because the worst thing we could have done would have been to go out at the beginning, not really know what we were talking about, and saying, here are the rules. So it's we have to hold back on making those decisions and let people work things out. So how have we amended assessments? Again, another AI-generated image. This is sort of a little bit of a snapshot of the sorts of things people have done that in this last term. And these are assessments that aren't sort of AI-based, but they are how do you actually deal in a world of assessment to make sure that what you're getting from the student actually is being generated by the student. So essays, as we suggested at the beginning of the year to people, if you come up with quite specific topics, or you require particular types of critique, or you're using class materials or things that are really, really current, the AI models, the large language models just generate sort of fairly average and incoherent answers. Oral assessment is making a resurgence. We've always had class participation. Different disciplines have used Vivas and discussion-based things, but I think that is coming back in, and I think there's a huge potential here. If we can do it efficiently, what we're really starting to do is to create a dialogic form of assessment so that the student can then demonstrate to the teacher and what they've done and develop some sort of pride in what they're producing. So Vivas and oral interaction can actually be a really positive thing that AI is going to push us back towards. And then really interesting sort of specific methods. So in coding, in maths, in those sorts of areas, people are actually asking students to use particular techniques to solve a problem. So it's not necessarily the most efficient technique or the common technique, but it's a way that demonstrates the student's understanding of that technique. And the AI models generally won't do that because they will want to revert back to what the most common predictable way of solving something is. Mixing text and drawing in open book assessments. And I loved the one that one course told us that they tested every multiple choice question against AI, and if the AI got it wrong, it went into the test. The feedback was the test got a bit harder, but and then in longer projects, that real sense of a longitudinal approach to assessment, so that you build through stages and you use the feedback of each stage to work on to the next stage. I think that's a really positive thing that sort of assessment redesign will push us towards. And these really interesting ones of working in groups and then writing individual reports about the group work, which is by definition going to be very individualistic and hard for AI to do, much more than help with the language around. And then posters and videos also really good, although I suspect in a year's time there'll be great AI platforms that will produce amazing videos and posters for us, so they may have a limited shelf life. More positively, though, I think we are really starting to look at how do we actually get the students to use AI, expect the use of AI. Now, at this stage, we've got to be careful about licensing issues and privacy issues, but I think by the end of the year, we are probably going to be in a position where we'll be mainstreaming AI as part of assessment, in the sense that you can either require the student to write with AI and critique it, or you can ask the student to draw on drafts, or possibly to use a draft and put it into an appendix. So all of these sorts of things are going to be relevant. But going back to the sort of the policing thing, and again, see the AI hand there, the question of, so this is the thing about detection, isn't it? You just have to look carefully and then you can immediately see there's an issue. The AI tool's been really interesting, I think, for us, because what it's really done is it's been a helpful way for students to do the right thing. So students actually don't want to sort of take shortcuts with AI, but they're tempted to do that unless there's a countervailing force. So the idea that there is in fact some mechanism for checking, I think, has been really helpful for students, and it's helped students who worried about other students cheating. So that's been a positive. It's also, I think, been really positive for staff in that once you've put your assessment through in this term and you've seen what the AI reports have looked like, if there's very few of them, then you can be certain that your assessment is actually fairly AI resistant. If it's got a lot of AI reporting going on, then the real question is whether you want to embrace that and whether you actually want the assessment to be based around AI. We haven't seen huge spikes in AI reported misconduct centrally, and that's interesting in itself, because the ones that tend to have popped up have been contract cheating situations where these poor students felt so much pressure that they paid someone to write their answer, and they thought the person was writing their answer, and they hand over the money for it, and in fact what they got back was something from ChatGPT. So they got sort of stung twice. And we suspect lots of AI contract cheating companies have been doing this for a while, so this is going to flush that out as well. But the other thing that sort of it's exposed is that there's been a lot of use of grammar correction software and students who've been using writing in one language and translating into another. And that's something that we've sort of anecdotally known has happened, but the existence of this tool now allows us to see the extent of it, and that allows us to have conversations with ourselves about whether or not we think that's acceptable, and with students about whether it's the right way to do things. Workload issues though, because at the moment there really isn't a dashboard view, and that's a problem, but I think by the end of the year when Turnitin release a dashboard view, that's going to help. And I'm really looking forward to institutional views of the prevalence of AI detection across courses, because that I think will then help us to understand exactly what our issues are around assessment. And in terms of investigating AI reports, as I said before, we've made a really, really strong emphasis that this is not a detection tool. It doesn't prove anything. It's a flag. It's a way to start a conversation. And it's been really, really important for us to say to staff and to students that it's the start of a conversation. So just because something is flagged doesn't mean that you actually have been cheating. All it means is that there's a reason to have a conversation about why is it that it's coming up in that way. And in lots of ways, I think if we can really sort of move beyond that sort of knee-jerk reaction to a much more normalisation of this, as I said, it's almost like Vivas. You mightn't get it in every course, but in lots of courses you'll have your lecturer just say to you, hey, can you tell me about your essay? What did you think? What was your favourite part about it? Which bit are you most proud of? Then I think we can actually start to build some really positive sort of communication channels. And they have to be timely. You don't want to be asked 4 weeks later, why did you write paragraph 6? Because, as the student said, we forgot the next day anyway. We had the next assignment to do. And I think all of this is, all of these tools are also really sort of encouraging us to rethink our assignments. So as academics, we have a feedback mechanism to know how effective our assessments are. So what are the students telling us themselves about how they're using it? So the really interesting things, students are using AI tools to write emails to us so that the emails are more professional, and so we understand what they're actually asking. We've got a huge use already by students using it for professional purposes, because as you know, if you've just come out of high school, it's hard to understand how to write it in the professional way. So resumes, CVs, complaints to lecturers are all now being ChatGPT generated. So that's really good. Students are using it a lot with helping with their studies, so there's that inspiration thing of, I don't know what topic to pick, give me some topics. I don't know how to structure this answer, give me some structure. I wonder what an answer might look like on this topic, give me a first draft. And one of the things we know from learning is that if a student has never seen an answer for a topic before, they're in the dark on their first attempt. So there's a whole lot of really positive things where students are actually using AI. They're not writing their answer with it, but it's really informing the way they then approach their answer. And it's also helping them with their learning too. So you say something in the lecture that made no sense to anybody except you, they can just ask ChatGPT to explain it in simple terms. So that's been really helpful for students. It helps them to summarise notes, although they themselves recognise that the shortcutting of that process can be, those shortcuts can be detrimental to them. So they also are telling us that they're struggling with how do they make themselves do the hard work in order to get the learning rewards. So it's a really sort of intelligent conversation I think the students are having with us and with themselves. And really interesting ones about recording lectures, which I have some sort of copyright and privacy issues around, but I think we have to recognise this is going to be happening. So if you're giving a class, there's probably somebody with a laptop with an AI program summarising what you're saying. There's probably somebody in the room doing it now. And research skills, huge advances on research skills. I had to go to the library and learn the Dewey Decimal System to find a book, and then I had to photocopy it. If I could, queue up for the photocopier, then the next generation discovered Google Scholar with a list of links. Now you get the link and you get the summary, so you don't need to click through to the link, so you can find out. So I think there's a huge sort of advances there, which then give the students more time to spend on writing the answer, so we can redesign assessments in light of that. But others, as I said back at the beginning, really worry about which ones of these am I allowed to do, which are ethical, which are going to get me into trouble. So there's this massive desire from students for us to help to explain. And the answer to that really in lots of ways is that for every course, when you start the course, have a conversation with your students about your expectations and understand their use, and start the conversation, and then these issues go away. So in terms of teaching, there's a whole lot of interesting things coming out at the moment. We've got people who are using AI to generate rubrics, to generate learning outlines, learning outcomes. If you've got to do some regulatory thing for the university, why not do it on AI? There's a whole lot of mechanical, if you like. I was going to say menial, but they're important, but they're mechanical processes that we can save, get our time back by using with AI. And I think that there's no detriment to the student in doing that. So it's a lot of really helpful things there. Sorry, I was just talking to a blank screen. That's what I was saying. And the other thing that's really significant too is the ability to instantly create case studies and exemplars in class. So you can show a student, you can create a case study for a scenario, with just a few key points, and then you've got something rich for the students to talk about in class. Or if you really want to show the students what an average answer is to the problem you've just set, get ChatGPT to produce an answer in class, and then you can all pick it apart, and at the end of it all the students themselves realise that they're smarter than the AI. So there's a huge amount of capacity to have a sort of a not very good student in your class who's the AI who you can ethically pick on. So that's a really helpful thing. And I think we haven't really got to this yet, but the whole notion of personal tutors, I know the students are already doing it, but how do we actually incorporate it into our own classroom, and how do we start to think about out-of-class tutoring which is based and trained on the materials that we've got for the courses? I mean, we've got licensing to sort through, but I think by next year we'll be having a whole lot of ancillary teaching being done with AI, and that's really going to help us to really move ahead in terms of discussion-based learning. In terms of curriculum, I think we're looking at the issue of scaffolding AI through the degree. I mean, we have to assume that by next year there are students coming out of high schools who are more proficient at AI than we are in lots of ways, but what they don't know is the discipline area. So what we've got to do is we've got to assume that they will be using AI to answer every question that we set them, or every activity they're doing. So we need to think about how do we actually scaffold their use so that they use it appropriately and they know when is the answer right and when is the answer wrong. Which means I think we need to rethink the starting point of knowledge and skills. So what don't we have to teach them anymore? What can we just assume that the AI will predictably get right each time, so we don't need to worry about that? And are they ever going to be in a world where there isn't an AI in their phone? So how much of it do they really need to know? And these are really difficult conversations for us to have, given we've got an entire lifetime dedicated. I mean, my research area is in the crime of larceny, which is a middle-aged offence that every jurisdiction in the world except for New South Wales has abolished. And I'm waiting for New South Wales to do it, and then I won't have a research career. That's the sort of thing I think that we're all grappling with AI. So what we've really got to focus on are the creative and critical aspects of knowledge. It's asking the questions rather than producing the data that is really what higher education is about. And as somebody pointed out to me this week, what we've really got to think about is what are the methodologies that each discipline uses to critique AI? So different disciplines probably will have different ways of unpacking an AI-produced output to work out whether it's true, and that may be different across different disciplines. So the thing that might differentiate the disciplines is their approach to critical analysis of AI. So yeah, let AI do all the predictable stuff, and then we get to play with the unpredictable stuff. So that then probably means, as sort of a concluding thought, that is AI quality the competence level? So if you've done your first draft and you put it back into AI and AI says fix this and you say yes, and you keep interacting with the AI to get your answer to perfect in terms of the AI, is that what we expect as a submission standard for assessment into the future? So that we won't actually care about how polished your final product is, we will expect it to be perfectly polished. What we'll actually be looking at is the underlying ideas and the concepts that you used when you constructed it, because everybody's answer will be perfect, but their underlying idea might be flawed. And I think that completely turns around our notion of what we're trying to do in assessment in universities. So institutionally, we need to get very nimble and agile. We can't have 3-year processes for changing degrees and structures and that kind of stuff. We're going to have to change things constantly, so I think we have to move to a principles-based approach to the way in which we think about quality. I think we are going to need huge investment in professional development for staff so that we all understand what's happening in AI, because frankly we don't, and we're going to be we're already probably behind lots of other people in terms of understanding it. We also need to bring industry into the classroom, because industry is the cutting edge of the use of AI, and they need to be there to help us to develop that curriculum. But at the same time, we have a really important role, fundamentally important role, to tell industry where the biases are, where the flaws are, where the issues are to the shiny things, that we actually can stand back and tell people how to use AI in appropriate ways. And so I think that's good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That was fantastic. You fitted a lot into that 20 minutes. Congratulations. On one of your last slides, you said a curriculum evolution. Evolution kind of gives us that idea of we have time to do this. It seems to me more like a revolution. And I'm just wondering, as an institution, how do we actually make this change fast? And are we ready to make that change fast? What knowledge do we need? What is it that we are at deficit with?
It's a good question. I mean, the evolution thing is in there for Merlin, obviously. But I think it's evolution rather than revolution, because with revolution you throw out everything and you stop. But evolution is constant, and evolution builds on what you have. So it's an incredibly high-speed evolution. Or mutation, if you like. So I think the answer is we all have to be. I don't think we would have coped with this year if we hadn't been through COVID, because I think we're just going, oh my God, this is so hard what we're doing. But there's no way we could have done this in 2020, and so I think we are all slowly, without realising, raising our competence level for change. And I think we will just absorb it, and we'll just keep on. And I mean, if any institution in the world can cope with this change, it's the university, because that's what we do. We critique and analyse and change.
So a question on assuring quality. How can we be sure that we actually are graduating students who have critical thinking, creativity, and all of those higher order skills with our current forms of assessment, or even what we're thinking of the future will look like if they're going to be so highly reliant on AI?
That's one of those really unfair questions.
True. But as a colleague, I can ask you that question.
No, unfair in the sense that it asks something that can't be answered, because there's no such thing as a universal institutional stamp which says every single one of our students is actually perfect for your job. It's more, I think it's more about universities being really clear about what it is they are actually teaching their students to do, or teaching's the wrong word too. It's what sort of journey are the universities on with their students, and then employers understanding what that is and coming sort of part of the conversation about it. But honestly, I think, you know, there's, as somebody was saying this week, there's nobody at this institution who doesn't really care about their teaching and doesn't want their students to be the very best they are. The debates that we have in the university are never about whether we care. The debates are always about what is the measure of quality and the clashing notions of the good. So I think that creative tension in universities, particularly in a time like this, means that I think we can be pretty confident that our students are going to be pretty extraordinary as a result of that tension. Yeah.
Still sticking on that idea of quality, do you think our professional bodies and accrediting bodies have caught up with what AI is and what we need to do?
That's it. All right. So this is the diplomatic answer, isn't it? I think it's incredibly hard, isn't it? I mean, unless you're completely, so, you know, my kids got annoyed with me over January because I was obsessed by AI, and then I came back to, you know, I kept sort of doing answers in ChatGPT, you know, sort of thing. And then when I came back to uni, everybody else had a holiday, and so I realised I was going, this is a big thing, we've got to do stuff, and I was going, what is this? And then a month later, everybody was going, oh my God, this is it, and I went, oh yeah, I've done that. So I think timing is everything. So I think our accrediting bodies are catching up. They're not quite where we are, but they are very quickly going to get far ahead of us because they are much more connected to industry than us. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's going to be a really useful and fruitful conversation to have with the accrediting bodies. But I think the really big issue that we have to have in these times of change is humility. So we have to be humble about what we know, and they have to be humble about what they know. And if we could actually all be fairly humble about it, then I think we'd come to a solution.
I think I really like the principled approach that we have, but we also do have things like Turnitin and Turnitin Checker. Knowing that there is a false positive rate, do you think it's acceptable risk for us to use that as a case for investigating AI, especially since it's likely that we're going to be wrong as often as we are right?
That's really interesting. So there's studies that are coming out into the use of these tools, and there are lots of small-scale studies, and so we're really waiting for really large-scale studies. But a couple of studies that I saw recently suggested that the ability for a human to pick AI is about 50%, and the ability for these checkers to pick AI is probably about 80%. That's still not 100%. Yeah. And plus there's false positives. But the larger ones, at least, seems to be built with a bias against picking AI. I suppose what I'm trying to say is I think we'd be crazy to not use these tools as a way of alerting us to issues, but I think we'd equally be crazy if we actually if we rested on that, because it is a black box. And at the end of the day, academic integrity and plagiarism is an academic judgment, it's not a technical judgment. And we all know from use of similarity checkers over the years that just because you get a similarity score of 60 doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the paper, but if you get a similarity score of 5%, it may be terrible. So it's really about saying, okay, this is just have a second look and then use your judgment. The real tricky thing at the moment is we don't have enough experience with looking at papers to feel confident that we can exercise our judgment, and that's something we just have to work through.
It's a good place for us to be, right? We're co-learning with our students, which is really quite exciting. So there is opportunities with AI, and if I ask you to look into the future, what do you hope AI will deliver for education?
Oh, well, I mean, I've watched lots of science fiction books and lots of science fiction films and read lots of books. So I'm really sort of hopeful that somehow all of the menial tasks that we don't want to do will be taken away from us, and all of the fun ones that we want to do will be enhanced. But my suspicion is that all of these dreams sort of never really come to pass, and we'll still be doing the same jobs we were doing, 20 years ago in 20 years' time. But there'll be tweaks to it because of the AI. But yeah, I think, you know, AI is a bit like washing machines, isn't it? I mean, it really has. Washing machines had huge social benefits, but the washing still has to be done every week.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Thank you, Alex. That
Thank
was
you.
a wonderful talk and a wonderful conversation.